everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I am joined up by a wonderful author whose book I cannot tell you enough about, and that is Kris Spisak. Is that, did I?
Spisak.
Spisak. Okay.
Yes.
See, I butchered everybody's name, so welcome to the club of being part of the Butchered Names Club. So,
What I'm here for.
but the book is Becoming Baba Yaga. It is one of the best books I have read this year, and probably one of the best ones I read in 2024 as well. So 10 out of 10 recommend. We're going to talk all about it, but Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, of course, the book was incredible. I loved your storytelling throughout it. I loved hearing all of the different lore behind Baba and all the different stuff behind it. It was just, oh, chef's kiss. It was perfect. 10 out of 10. Everyone go buy the book. Just go buy it. If you can't buy it, go request it at your library. I'm not joking. This is an incredible book. You want to know about Baba Yaga? Go buy the book. Okay? There's your shameless plug. We're done. Okay.
Love it.
So obviously you have written a fiction novel about Baba as well. So why did you decide to go ahead and write a nonfiction about her? And obviously, where did the inspiration come from?
Absolutely. So I've been a writer and a lover of storytelling for as long as I can remember. And I just have this inherent belief that every single one of us is a storyteller. And how do we connect with humanity? How do humans connect soul to soul? It's through the stories that we tell each other. It's through the words that we share. So that's where I became an author in the very beginning. It was all about language and empowering storytelling and empowering communications. And that's where my first three books were really in that space where it's really, how do you tell your life story? How do you write your family history? How do you make sure you're writing to communicate the ideas in your head, to make sure that they come out through your fingertips onto the keyboard or with your quill or whatever you happen to be doing? And that's where I started my journey, because just human communications and storytelling just feed my soul. And there's just such magic and human connection through story. And that's where I started things. But my first novel came out in 2022, and that is called The Baba Yaga Mask. And the story there, in brief, is an Ukrainian grandmother who is obsessed with Baba Yaga tales, a Ukrainian grandmother who survived World War II and came across the ocean. And before, she was old and she was in her 90s. And she said, you know what, before I die, I need to see Ukrainian dancing on soil where it makes sense. I'm not going to give away too much of the book, but she flies to Eastern Europe, steps off an airplane, disappears. And what we have is a dual timeline novel that's going back and forth between her two granddaughters who are running across Eastern Europe trying to find out what happened to their grandmother. Did something happen to her? Is she sick? Is she ill? Or is she up to something? A woman obsessed with Baba Yaga might just be up to something, and that's not a spoiler. And it's going back and forth between the hunt for their Baba, which just means grandmother, and then the grandmother's tale when she was a teenager in World War II Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian, and that was just the World War II Ukrainian piece intertwined with folk tales was something that was just always a part of my soul. So that came out 2022. Interestingly enough, it came out a couple weeks after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I was telling the story of the last time a foreign force invaded Ukraine and questioned its identity. Just there were so many profound pieces of that story for me. But the more I spoke with book clubs and did Zoom book clubs and community groups and libraries and anybody listening, I love talking folktales and Baba Yaga and storytelling. So call me, get in touch. I love doing talks. But I was doing so much, and then so many people were saying, well, what do you mean Baba Yaga? Who is this folktale character? Who is this witch? Who is this goddess? And the more I talked, I realized people didn't know. And you know what? I love fiction, but I also love nonfiction. So I found myself with this amazing opportunity to dive in deep into the nonfiction of who is Baba Yaga? Who has she been? How far back in history does she go? What has she epitomized at different moments in history? And in the modern world, how can she be this transformative agent for the modern individual to become a better version of themselves by studying a folktale, by studying an old presence? And there was just so much to say. Hence, I wrote another book.
Hi, And it's a phenomenal book. And, you know, the interesting thing is I already knew a little bit about Baba Yaga anyway. One of my coven members works with Baba Yaga. So we, you know, have kind of delved a little bit into that as well. But I didn't know as much about her lore and her history until obviously reading your book, and just the way that you told the stories of her lore and the things that she did and how she is sometimes good and sometimes bad and somewhere in
Right.
between.
Right.
um she's just an incredible goddess, and not only that, she's just all of the different facets of her are so incredible to dive into, and you don't realize it until you start reading the mythos and you start understanding it, and you're just like, wow, you are a really complex character in this whole
Right.
like vastness of society and world. And like I found myself relating to it, and I'm like, I needed this book in 2025. I did not
Oh,
realize how much I needed this book in 2025. And it was crazy because it was, you talked about all these different aspects, including like, how do we deal with anxiety and how does Baba bring out the anxiety? And it's like, okay, all right, I hear you, Baba. I think we're going to have a conversation after this, but it was just an
excellent.
incredible storytelling that you did. So, obviously you have written this beautiful book, and I know that Baba has a lot of myths, and she is cherished around the world in many different aspects, and her vastness kind of touches on different parts of society. What was your favorite aspect to write about? And you know, just kind of dive a little bit into that.
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite things, especially diving into Baba Yaga's history and how she has been viewed for centuries, was really looking back to see the breadcrumbs of how the folk tales intertwined with the divinity of her,
Mm-hmm.
and how that aspect of being a goddess looks like there are breadcrumbs that go back hundreds upon thousands of years. And you can find breadcrumbs of a divinity that is parallel, if not the same as Baba Yaga, back to 7,000 years ago.
Wow.
And suddenly your mind is a bit, at least my mind was a bit blown to have this understanding of this guiding force that's just constantly reminding you, yeah, the world can be a brutal place, but this is nothing new. We
Mm-hmm.
all have things that terrify us. We all have things that we have to face that are hard. But you know what? You can get through it. And you know what? You have to face the shadows sometimes. You have to face the darkness. And there was a question that comes up in her folk tales again and again that I just love. And I feel like it's something that is spiritual in its roots, but it's then intertwined with folk tales. And I personally like to think of her as this like dark life coach for the modern world. She always asks protagonists, are you here today to do deeds, or are you here to run from them? And yes, this can be a question to Prince Ivan as he's seeking out the Firebird.
Mm-hmm.
This can be a question to a goddess at a temple. Are you here to do deeds, or are you here to run from them? And I find myself asking that question when I wake up every morning of, okay, new day. Am I today going to do good things, do my best, or am I going to continue to run from things? And we can examine that question from both sides of what are the deeds that we're going to do, or what is it that I've been running from? What is it that I've not been facing? And for this folktale character who has all of this depth to remind us to be our best self, to remind us to not be afraid to face the darkness,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly I'm inspired. And I think, again, it's that place where spirituality meets story. And the humanity that we have been in the past is no different than the humanity that we are now versus what we will be in the future. And it kind of connects all of those pieces for me.
That's incredible. And, you know, that's such a positive thing to really take away from all of Baba's messages because, you know, also it's like, are you seeking this out on, you know, your own volition? Are you doing this? Are you under the influence of somebody else that's doing this? You know, and that's also a really good thing to take into life. It's like, are you doing these things because you choose to?
Right.
Or are you doing these things because you're doing it for somebody else who's, or someone who's making you? And it really
Exactly.
brings back that whole bodily autonomy aspect of it too. And you know, Baba is a very big feminist in a lot of
She
ways.
totally is.
So you get all of those beautiful aspects of saying, are you doing this for yourself? Because if you're not doing it for yourself, then what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you walking through
Exactly.
life like this?
Exactly. And for anybody who's ever been afraid of saying no when they mean no, and like, you know what, in this moment, I can't actually help something else because I need to help myself. And I think so many of us just want to
Mhm.
give and give and give and give. And Baba Yaga reminds us, you know what, sometimes it's okay, just no and be firm. And that's okay.
No is a
Um,
complete sentence.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And she's just fabulous for, yes, her feminism and her respect and dignity and aging and her, oh gosh, there's one, her respect of nature, her respect of strong women and motherhood. I mean, there's so many pieces you can talk about for her. Again, hence why I wrote the book.
I mean, she, like I was saying before, she has so many amazing aspects to her that you really could just continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper, even into just, we all like to say a little bit around here that witchcraft is kind of spicy psychology. And so just the aspects of the psychological therapeutic aspects that she brings towards you through her mythos and her stories and her questioning and all the things that she's about, like, it's just empoweringly amazing. And
It is.
she's such an incredible goddess. It really is. And she should be talked about more. But, honestly, I think she's more feared than really embraced in such a positive manner.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of those like launching points for me. As I talked about her, like with book clubs and whatnot for my novel,
Hmm.
people are like, oh, so she's just like this Grimm's fairy tale witch. I'm like, no, 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 no. She's like way more complicated than this. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, let me tell you about Baba Yaga because she does pop up in modern culture all the way. I mean, literally, she exists as a Scooby Doo villain in an episode. And I mean, that's not very not very three-dimensional in a Scooby-Doo episode. She appears, goodness, in for John Wick
Hmm.
fans or Keanu Reeves fans, Keanu Reeves' code name is Baba
Baba
Yaga
Yaga.
in the John Wick series, and there you get the subtitle that says Boogeyman, and you're just everybody who knows Baba Yaga just starts
Yeah,
screaming. We're like, no, it's not just Boogeyman. I'm like, yes, she might kill you if you are not living up to her expectations, but you know what? She has some really fierce expectations that are kind of a challenge to us all. That if we can be brave, if we can be good, if we can be hardworking, if we can be clever, think about the greatness we can do for the world. And if we live up to those expectations, Baba Yaga becomes almost this fairy godmother like creature. But you have to work for it, which
hmm,
again, you're not making a wish upon a star. You've got to work for it and give it your all. But if you do, great things can happen. And that's just a message we all need, isn't it?
that is an incredible message. And as somebody who is a John Wick fan, I literally have a John Wick pop sitting on my desk because I just, okay, Keanu has done nothing wrong like in his entire life. Like, I don't think he has a bad bone in his
Fair.
body. So long live Baba Yaga through Keanu Reeves.
Exactly. I have no issue. My only issue is that subtitle.
Yes, of course, because and the funny thing is it's true. Like, my first introduction to Baba Yaga was, God, years ago, and it was through another pagan group that I was in who was talking about Baba Yaga, and they were using Yaga's mythos and lore to basically say, hey, if you don't, behave to their children, it's like Baba Yaga's going to come get you. And it's like, I don't think we should be telling our kids that, but I mean, okay, I guess you do you. But the cool thing about it was my first introduction to her, and yeah, she was scary because of that. And now, like, you get to see all the different aspects of, learning about her, and you're just like, you're not so scary after all, lady. I see you.
Right,
I
right.
see
And it's
what you're doing
interesting.
here.
Exactly. And it's so fascinating because different moments in time have embraced her in different ways. And really, in the Stalinist era of Russia, she was a morality tale. Do a good, make good choices, be a good citizen, or else Baba Yaga will get you. And there are lots of those tales about like her black geese will come up and swoop up the bad children and all of that stuff. And that's a part of who she was. And I think that's why the fun of my book was called Becoming Baba Yaga,
Hmm.
because she really was becoming one thing after another thing with these roots that always kind of hummed underneath consistently. But she kind of has her different metamorphoses in the between. But I mean, who among us hasn't? I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, 20 years
Right, of
ago.
course.
And all of those pieces of who I have been have made me into who I am today. but they all grow upon each other and they're kind of adding to the complexities of the tale of what has always hummed underneath me. And I think sometimes as people, we forget that about ourselves, that, you know what, who we have been, choices we have made in the past, that's not who we are forever. That's not our
Mhm.
singular trait. We're always becoming. You know,
Exactly.
it's like we're human beings, not human doings. I love that line so much, but it's one of those things. It's like becoming is such a piece of who we are. And it's true for the stories that we tell and the gods and goddesses that have kind of hummed underneath for a very long, long time.
And you know, the funny thing is you mentioned that the her black geese. When I had started to read that chapter, I was actually in a voice call with my coven member who works with Baba Yaga, and
Mhm.
she was saying, she's like, "Wow, those geese are really loud." And I was like, "What geese?" And she goes, "There's some geese honking outside over our house." And I'm like,
Oh my God.
"Shut up." And she's like, "Why?" And I was like, "I literally just read this whole thing about Baba Yaga's black geese as you said that. And you work with her." And she goes, "Maybe I need to go talk to Baba." And I'm like, "I'm thinking you might."
Sometimes when things like that happen, it just makes you pause. And it's funny, I think that's one of those pieces that for my entire life, I've been terrified of geese. I do not know what part of my soul this speaks to or what childhood incident I do not remember, but my entire life I have been terrified of geese. And the more I started studying Baba Yaga, her lore, and all of the different pieces of her, and I kept finding all of these references to Baba Yaga's geese that are going to snatch up the people who are not making good choices. I'm like, is this some like simmering in my ancestry thing that I'm scared of geese because my grandmother was scared of geese because of Baba Yaga and her grandmother before her. It's like, wow, is this like a piece of my soul coming out in my fears that I didn't even know about?
It's an ancestral fear, apparently.
I think so. I think so. It's all tied to Baba Yaga.
It's all tied to Baba Yaga. So, you have mentioned, obviously, in the book so many aspects of Baba Yaga, and you have also highlighted so many of her myths. Which one's your favorite?
Mm. I think my favorite is the tale of Maria Morevna,
Mm-hmm.
which is this warrior queen. And I mean, one, don't we all need more stories of warrior queens in
Of
our
course we
folktales?
do.
Because
Of
I mean, we just do.
course.
So it's so funny because so many of different folk tales, they sound like they have pieces from different traditions, and maybe we've heard versions of them from different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, there's a warrior queen who she has captured something in her dungeon, and she has this new husband, Prince Ivan, because they're always named Prince Ivan in Slavic folklore. And she has this new husband, and it's
Yes.
like, well, whatever you need to do, just don't go down to the dungeon and open that door. And of course, she goes off on a crusade to like save the world, as you know, this fierce warrior queen would. And what does her new husband do? He goes and opens the dungeon, and it's Koshi the Deathless, this immortal wizard that she was the only one who was ever able to capture him. And he's off, and then he goes and captures Maria Morevna. And then Prince Ivan, her new husband, is, well, one, like, oops, didn't mean to do that. And then the only person who can tame this immortal wizard, Koshi the Deathless, is Baba Yaga because he is the most powerful being on earth,
Mm-hmm.
except Baba Yaga. And so Prince Ivan's kind of a growing up moment for him for going from kind of bumbling new husband to having to face all of these different animals and different trials he has to go through until he finds Baba Yaga. And she's the one person who can help him get his wife back, who, and all of this, the rest of
Mm-hmm.
the story. But anyway, I love just the feminism of Maria Morevna being this fierce, fierce character there. And I love that Koshi the Deathless, this immortal wizard, one of the most powerful beings on earth, the only one more powerful is Baba Yaga. Again, there's this feminism just
Mm-hmm.
between the lines of so many of her tales.
I love that too, and that's such a good story. Like, I mean, God, there's so many that are just so good. But yeah, that one was amazing. I honestly don't know if I have a favorite because I loved them all, and each one I was like, this one can't get any better because the last one was so great. And then of course it would get better, and I'm like, okay, okay, I get it. You're awesome. We get it.
And it was just so fun because every story I have in there. So for those of you listening, it's a nonfiction book and it's analyzing the different pieces of who
Mhm.
Baba Yaga has been over time and kind of going everywhere from the archaeology to the divinity to we're really all to kind of the, again, self-empowerment.
Mhm.
But between every nonfiction chapter is a folktale retelling going back
Hmm.
to the canon of Baba Yaga, if you can declare such a thing, just of the classics for anybody knows her folktales. And so I play with a lot of her most famous tales, but I mean, I'm a writer, so I kind of tweak them with a little bit more of a modern lens.
Hmm.
I had, I think, the most fun with there's an old story about the birth of Baba Yaga and where she
Hmm.
came from. And retelling that one from a modern lens was perhaps my favorite twist on kind of her Baba Yaga legends, but I'll let that be for the readers to find out what I did with that one.
Yes, we're not going to give you too many spoilers because obviously you're going to have to go dive into this for yourself and get all of the amazing lessons of Baba for yourself out of the book, because obviously we could sit here and teach them all to you. We could, but are we? No, because that's not how Baba would want you to do it either. That would be cheating. So she would want you to go do the work yourself, read the book, get the message, and then obviously do the research for yourself. And, Kris has obviously opened this beautiful door with this book to, all the other fascinating places that you can go and continue to research. So, if somebody is like, saying, "Oh, hey, I've read your book now, Kris. Where would I go next? What would you recommend? What kind of sources would you point them to?"
So the fun thing is with this kind of intersection of examining world stories to figure out why is it that this story has stuck around for centuries? There's something humming underneath. So it's one of those things that when you look at then folk tales and stories from any cultural tradition and you realize this is one that's stuck, what is it about this story that has just stuck around for such a long time? And all of a sudden you have this almost kind of self-empowerment practice that you can do this examination of famous stories. But why did this stuck? What is the lesson here for me? How have people connected over this story? And I think that's where I'm going in many future books to come is just playing with these famous stories and why they've stuck and how they can change who we are and empower humanity in the present day. Also, for those of you who are writers, and you know what, I'm going to pause there because for some reason, the term writer is a term that so many people are like, oh, well, I write, but I'm not a writer. But okay, stop there. So, if you put down words, you are a writer,
Yep.
no matter whether you're published or not, that does not matter. So, for those of you who enjoy putting down words, one, you're a writer. Two, start writing your own family story, write your own life story, and then look at the lines of how have you become who you've become? Because you know what, there's so much profound inspiration inside of ourselves. I
Hmm.
teach a lot of workshops and courses, many of which are available online on mining your own life story for fiction or memoir. Go check those out if that's you, or else those who are trying to empower their fiction. I have a lot of workshops and online webinars on those pieces too. But the world is endlessly fascinating, and when it comes to old stories, there is so much more excavating to be done.
Hmm. I absolutely agree with that. And, the fun thing is your life can really be such an amazing story on its own. Even if you're like, "Oh, but I'm nobody and like I haven't done anything like that." You would be surprised how much the mundane can actually drive a story forward.
Right,
And even if you're adding elements to, say, a fantasy novel or whatever, like there's still so many parts of you that you can add into that that make the story better, that make it richer, that make it more interesting. And, kind of bring it back to Baba Yaga, her stories obviously have so many different aspects to them. But the other thing, too, is each one is her telling this wonderful tale of how she has empowered somebody, how she's helped somebody, how she's taught somebody a lesson, and maybe not so savory way, but it's her
right,
story. And if we just took that at face value and be like, oh, well, she's just this, goddess that's, over here from, the Ukrainian and Russia eras and all this other stuff. And it's like, but she's also over here making waves here in America and
right.
Canada and other parts of the world, and she has stood the test of time. So maybe if you write down your story, it will too.
Exactly. Exactly. We have so much inside of us, and I think we sometimes doubt that or forget that about ourselves. But as you said, the little pieces of our day to day make up so much that empowers our whole.
Yes, it absolutely does. So Kris, what's next on the docket for you? What do you have coming up? Do you have anything you can tease? Do you have, I mean, obviously you've talked about some of your workshops and your classes, but what's next in terms of, are you going to be writing any more nonfiction along these lines, or is it going to go back to fiction? What are you thinking?
I think I have developed a path that is perhaps a little bit unique, but I'm super excited about this kind of idea of having two different books that are both completely standalone. My novel stands by itself. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need the nonfiction to go with it. You don't need the fiction to go with the nonfiction. However, they are also partners to the whole that if you read my novel, The Baba Yaga Mask, that dual timeline fiction, and you read Becoming Baba Yaga, my nonfiction, there's a lot of richness that you can gather from both directions when you
Mm-hmm.
read both of them. And I think I've kind of fallen in love with that for myself because as I've said, I'm obsessed with storytelling and
Mm-hmm.
old stories that stick around and that people are just obsessed with. And I'm actually playing with Lewis Carroll next in Alice
Oh,
in Wonderland.
wow.
And
Okay.
I have a novel that is similarly dual time fiction, not with World War II Ukraine this time, obviously, but I have dual timeline fiction playing actually with Depression era Southern Appalachia.
Okay.
And Lewis Carroll, obviously not of Southern era Appalachia, but playing in that space, but then also the nonfiction complements of why is the world obsessed with Alice in Wonderland and how can that empower our lives? But more on that soon.
That sounds incredible. I'm excited for that. I look forward to that. You'll have to come back when everything is done and we'll have to talk more about that because that's going to be amazing. Um
Thank
and so I that sounds really cool. I'm really excited. So but
you.
I'm over here fangirl. I'm a fan now. So like you're stuck with me in your corners. So
Well,
hey.
likewise, man.
So um obviously you're doing that. So where can people find your classes? Where can they go to find you on social media? Where can people connect with you to make sure they're staying in the loop and on top of all your stuff that you're producing?
Absolutely. So you can come to my website, which is krisspisak.com, but I have a really hard to spell name. So if you want to also just go to babayagamask.com, that will redirect you to everywhere you want to go.
Perfect. So that's going to be where you can find Kris. You're going to be able to find all of Kris's books. You find classes. You'll find all the workshops, all the great stuff that's going to be there. You're probably going to also be posting your updates about your upcoming works, which are going to be awesome. And I can't wait for that. So everyone who's been listening, make sure that you definitely go pick up a copy of this amazingly beautiful book. The cover is gorgeous. The artwork in it's gorgeous. The storytelling is gorgeous. The whole book is just gorgeous. Please go get a copy to your earliest convenience. And like I said before, if you're somebody who can't afford a copy, please go ask your local library. Make sure that you request one because they will get one. And you can request for the audiobook. There is a beautiful audiobook. I listened to it. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful. There's ebooks. You can also request both of those from your local library as well. And your library will have those apps available for you to listen to those or read them online on your devices, whichever you prefer. But yeah, use your local library. It's good for your community. It's good for you. It's good for everybody. So, like I said, if you can't afford one, that's the best option for you. That's going to be a great place. But also, if you can and you can support your authors, please do so. But even also requesting it from your local library, support your authors. So, there you go. um, Kris, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to have you back on the show again when your new stuff comes out. And everyone, this has been wonderful. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Be kind to each other and be kind to yourselves. And make sure you're taking care, especially in this crazy, crazy world. But as always, I will see you next time. And until then, bye bye, everyone.